Hi everyone, welcome to Leadership Adventure. I'm Marv McCarthy, your host, and I just wanted to thank you for taking time to join me today. Today is Thursday, January 25th, 2024, which means it's time for this week's Devo, and today's episode is called Don't Be a Prig. Let's jump right in. So I have to say, first of all, that I love today's title, Don't Be a Prig. Pastor Kyle Idleman wrote a book called One at a Time. And my favorite chapter in that book is Don't Be a Prig. And by the way, too, I highly recommend Kyle's book, so I've put a link for you below if you'd like to go check that out on Amazon. Now, I also happen to think, as a side note, that prig is a pretty fun word to say. Now, what is a prig? A prig is someone who is overly proper, self-righteous, judgmental, or smug. Many times, these prigs express these admirable traits with a particularly obnoxious attitude. This superiority can ooze out in a variety of situations, or so it seems, and a lot of times it's in regard to morals, manners, rules, or particular social conventions. And guess what? There are prigs in the church world. Let me ask you a question. How many people do you know, or have you encountered, or maybe it's you personally, who left the church, purposely stayed away from the church, or fell away from their faith altogether because of priggish behavior among believers? Maybe they didn't dress right. Maybe their background was too sketchy. Maybe they struggled with addiction or alcoholism. Maybe they had too many tattoos or piercings. Maybe their hair was too long. Or maybe they encountered church people who acted one way on Sunday and completely different throughout the week. Maybe. So bottom line, whatever their maybe was, they were treated as square pegs in round holes, or they didn't like what they saw or experienced in the church that they were attending. Now, how big a problem is this? Years ago, I taught a new Christians class. In the very first session, almost one of the first questions that I raised was, I always asked how many people had had a bad experience at some point in their lives with people who represented themselves as believers. Now, guess what the answer was, and you should probably sit down for this. Fully half to 3/4 of the hands in the room went up every single time. And that's over about 2,000 people that took that particular class over a several-year period. Now, is that qualitative data? Yes, absolutely. Is it accurate data? Yes, I believe that it is. Now, you're probably thinking about now that Marv just got up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. No, that's actually backwards. Today is actually about encouragement. And of course, the best encourager of all was Jesus himself. So let's turn to him for a story. Okay, now take a look at John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. I'm not going to read the whole thing here because of time. This is the story of the woman who was caught in adultery and brought before Jesus. Now here's how Jesus handled it. I am going to read verses 7 through 11. And whenever I quote scripture, I always use the English Standard Version, just FYI. So starting with verse 7, as they continued to ask him, he stood up and he said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent over and he was writing on the ground. Now, when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. So Jesus stood up again after he was writing and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." All I can say to that is, wow. Christ showed compassion, but he wasn't soft on the truth either. He told it like it was and commanded her not to continue in her life of sin. Now, one of the great privileges and mysteries of our faith is that God allows us to partner with him in sharing the good news. He entrusts us, which does surprise me sometimes, with conveying that message to others in a way that honors and glorifies him. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Love your neighbor as yourself. Be salt and light. And like we like to say at our church, be the hands and feet of Jesus in your community. Now let me wrap this up today with a reminder from Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Now, let's get to the encouraging part. The encouraging news is, you guys, that there are far more authentic and caring people out there in the church proclaiming Christ than there are prigs. So let's be one of those. Let's be one of the encouragers. After all, Jesus himself showed us the way. That's today's episode. Thanks for hanging out with me again, and I will see you next time.